And a very good evening, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special night tonight. We have the wonderful Dr. Dan Assisi from California with us live online. Good evening, Dr. Dan. And the lovely Fabrizio from Bournemouth. Fabrizio, you have an introduction, I believe you wish to share.
Yes, sir. Dear friends, a very warm welcome to this special Christmas event. It's our last talk for this year, 2020, and is a part of our ongoing series of events brought to you online by the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth in collaboration with Full Christian Spiritualist Church. I am Fabrizio Assunção from the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth, and I'm pleased to offer all of you very best wishes for a holy and joyful Christmas and a healthy, peaceful, and happy New Year. May God bless you all and keep us all safe. As a special treat, we are very honored to have our guest speaker, our dear friend, Dr. Dan Assisi from the United States. Dan is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute. You can also find him as the host of the Spiritist Conversations podcast. He holds a doctorate degree in education and a master's degree in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy from the University of Southern California. Dan gives a wide range of talks internationally on spirituality and spiritism with a mix of inspirational, deep thinking and his much appreciated good humor. Dan shares a message of hope and love through rational faith and both inspires and educates audience about our spiritual nature. His talk tonight is pre-recorded, as is a very special Christmas present for you. So no, it's not pre-recorded. We are live. So before we start Dan's talk, I'm pleased to hand over to Lawrence Saville at the Pro Christian Spiritualist Church for our opening prayer.
Well, that's a surprise. I'm glad that was just a short introduction, Fabrizio. That's good. Glad you didn't do the long one.
And I'm glad you went with the fancy words too. Thank you. Yeah, very kind words.
Yeah. How much are they paying you? Anyway.
I even got called doctor. I don't get called Dr. Dan very often. You all can just call me Dan. Thank you very much.
I always call you Dr. Dan. You're always known as Dr. Dan. So, dear friends, as we come to the close of this year, just link in for this moment with that divine within, that center, that point, that harmonious heart of our very beings, and give thanks. Give thanks for what we do have. Although at this time, this world, there is so much that we can find discord with, upset, anger, enmity, and hate. Let us put those vibrations, those thoughts, those energies to one side, for they serve no purpose. But just let us join in at this time in thankfulness that we are here. We have come through this year of years, a time we never anticipated or even thought possible. But tonight, each and every one listening here is testimony to the strength of spirit, to the ability to overcome, to the abilities to adapt, and the abilities to reach out that helping hand to those that we know who have a need. So again, let us just join together for this short time, in peace, in love, in humility, and in thankfulness. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lawrence. Now, my dear friends, we are now go over to Dan Assisi on the subject of a more spiritual Christmas.
Hello, everyone. It is great to be here with you. I first of all wanted to extend a warm embrace from Southern California, from San Diego here. It is lovely to have a chance to chat with you through the miracle of digital ones and zeros that teleport me from my office here at home in San Diego to you, whatever it is that you are I think, Lawrence did a really great job in framing these difficult times of ours, right? This past year has been incredibly challenging and different. And I think that we are very happy to have the possibility of having hope in the horizon. We all know that, vaccines for the coronavirus, for COVID-19, is among us. And there's definitely hope and reason for optimism. Nevertheless, it's been a really tough year. And I think that the end of the year and this time that we take to celebrate Christmas and the holidays and the festive season is one that lends itself to reflection and to meditation. And I think especially in this year that we have tons of reasons to be extra reflective, extra thoughtful about the things ahead. So if you are willing and you have the patience to put up with me for a couple of minutes, I would love to give us a little bit of a context of how I am thinking about this end of year and this Christmas, and how I am proposing to myself, first and foremost, to make it a more spiritual Christmas. And in so doing, I am hoping that it might make sense. It might help you somehow, along the way. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? I promise I won't talk too much. I'm going to try to, not PowerPoint you to death here. I do have a couple of slides just to kind of frame our perspective. And let's see if my fancy footwork is going to work. Let's see. Look at that. And I might need to kind of bend over so not to be hit by the bubbles there. But we think about Christmas as a very special time, of course, for those of us who follow the adventures of our older brother, the JC, as I call him sometimes, the Jesus Christ. And so, Christmas has been synonymous, obviously, with the birth of Jesus, with Santa Claus, and with many different Christmas traditions. But I ask myself at this time of the year, what really is Christmas? And so let's kind of just think a little bit about some of these important parts of Christmas to see where we can arrive at the end. Well, first and foremost, let's talk about some Christmas traditions. You might have, heard about Yuletide and the Yule log and so forth, but I was surprised to find out that the Yule log actually was a Norse tradition that has come from Scandinavia in celebration of this important season of, the winter solstice. And why is that so interesting and so important to us? Well, the winter solstice and the Yule celebration tradition really marked this point where we were upon the darkest night of the year, where light was at its slimmest and that darkness was at its apex. And that seems a little bit pessimistic. Why would we celebrate that? Well, we would celebrate that because that meant that the hardest and darkest days were behind us. If we were at the height of darkness, from there on, we would know that from the next couple of weeks and months, we would get more and more light in our lives. And so it was a celebration of light, of the return to light, the return of light to this world. And in the Scandinavian tradition, what they would do is they would celebrate by bringing these Yule logs and burning them. And while they were burning this special day, they would feast for as long as the logs were on fire. And it was also a very timely, place for celebrating, not only in Scandinavia but also in history in Europe as well, because at this part of the year, it was generally when they slaughtered cattle, because they would not want to feed it through the winter. So in this time of the year, they had plenty of meat and food. They also had mead. So I definitely call this the meat and mead time, because all the fermentation and all the winemaking that was taking place throughout the year would happen, would coincide with this end of the year. So, you're celebrating light, you have tons of food, you have tons of drink, and what else could you possibly want, right? Life was good in that moment in time. And it's no surprise to us, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this historical stuff because I think it's just interesting in general, but it's no surprise to us that if we are to go back, lots of years before that, we also had the Roman festival of Saturnalia. And in Saturnalia was also a month during this time of the year where the Roman society went crazy. It was basically their carnival, right? A whole celebration, things turned upside down. They would actually close businesses and schools just to kind of indulge and really, enjoy life to its fullest. And of particular interest to us is the idea that they celebrated the birth of Mithras, which was one of their key gods. And for some of them, it was the most important part of the year, and it happened to be celebrated on December 25th. So for a very long time, as a society, at least in the Western world, we have had the habit of celebrating the birth of light at the end of the year, where we get to stuff ourselves silly with food and drinks to celebrate life and that things are going to be okay. And so a lot of our Christmas traditions then really are not necessarily Christ-based to begin with, but nevertheless we have inherited, and I think that's a fascinating piece, right? So I want to put that out there, and hopefully I'm going to make it connect later. So just hang in there with me. So apart from that, we often tie it to the birth of Jesus, of course, because after all, that's what we celebrate, isn't it? But when we look at the birth of Jesus being on December 25th, we actually find that that might not be the case. You see, the birth of Jesus as being December 25th was a concoction of early Christians in the 14th century, where they actually decided that they were going to start to celebrate the birth of this prophet from Nazareth, because until then, the most important holiday was not the birth of Jesus, but it was actually Easter. It was actually his passing over. They didn't have a habit of celebrating those holidays, but it is believed that some of our early church leaders at the time thought that if they could perhaps insert the birth of Christ during this time of pagan holidays, they could slowly absorb pagan rituals into Christianity. And I think that tactic worked pretty well. Right? Nowadays, I think we forget about Saturnalia. We necessarily don't think of Yule log as something outside of Yuletide as something outside of Christianity many times. And so, fascinating perspective there that leads us to see how Christmas has changed through the time and through the years. So Christmas, as we know, it's really been something that had started as it relates to the birth of Christ from the fourth century. And I think many of you guys know that during the Puritan times with Oliver Cromwell, Christmas was actually canceled out there for you guys. They actually came in and said, no more of that nonsense. We don't want this like pagan-induced and not necessarily Bible-centric reality, because after all, you might remember that there were shepherds coming to visit Jesus, and that's unlikely to happen in the winter. The Bible does not really tell us anything about December 25th. They actually think it was some other time. So this December 25th as the birth of Christ is probably historically not accurate. Nevertheless, it's a really interesting perspective for us to be aware of in general. Right, in Boston here, out in the United States as well, because of that puritanical influence, Christmas was also outlawed in the early 1800s, which is a fascinating thing. You were fined if you celebrated Christmas. I think it's a very different reality than we're used to. Although this year, maybe now that I hear that Boris has canceled Christmas for you guys, you might get fined again. We might be going back in a completely different loop that is not Puritan at all, because I would not call Boris Puritan at all. But we've come into very different realities. So why do I say that? I say that to say that things have certainly been changing in this past 1600 years of celebration of Christmas, right? So let's take a little step further and talk about Santa Claus. Where does Santa Claus come from? I always wanted to know, because, there isn't a lot of connection between Jesus and Santa Claus, is there? I mean, we celebrate Christmas and Santa Claus seems to always be there, but where does he come from? And I think that's an interesting piece here. And I think most of us also know this, that Santa Claus actually is a remembrance of Saint Nicholas, who was a wealthy individual born in Turkey in the 3rd century of the Common Era. And he was a fascinating person for something that stood out very, very markedly. He gave away all his wealth and possessions to help others. And he would go and walk and travel through the countryside, helping the poor and the sick. And so he was fondly remembered by many folks as Saint Nicholas. The Dutch, when they brought it, back into American society, for instance, would say Saint Nicholas, Nicholas, so quickly, Saint Nicholas, that became Saint Claus. And that's why we have Santa Claus, which is a fascinating story. And I find it also very curious that perhaps the most unrelated of, traditions is perhaps the most connected with the Christ, this idea of giving and taking care of others. But that's perhaps fodder for conversation at another time. So I am going to this rather quickly so that we have time to chat, because at the end of the day, what we really want to do here is not have this bald guy from America telling you things, but instead have us have a chance to talk and really explore more what this all means. So there we have Santa Claus. So why do we say all of this? I think my point here is that Christmas and Christmas traditions have been changing since the beginning of time, as far as we can tell that we have been celebrating Christmas. And so in the middle of this pandemic, in the middle of this convoluted year that Lawrence described so well in his initial prayer, maybe it's time for us to change it again. Maybe it's time for us to dive into the idea of reinventing Christmas for ourselves. Because what we have oftentimes come to assume that Christmas is an opportunity for us to eat a lot, drink a lot, which not bad necessarily in my book, spend time with family, and unfortunately, I can tell you in my country, overindulge in consumerism when we buy tons of things and we forget the reason behind the season. So what we're really talking about here today is the invitation that these times have brought us so that we can reinvent the concept of Christmas. Because if we really are to think about Christmas and have the Christ placed centrally into that holiday, then I think we also beg the question of what does it really mean to have Christ in our lives? And I think that the challenge here, at least for me, I'm going to be honest with you, is that we are oftentimes fed a version of what the Christ was or who he was and what he has done that might even rub us the wrong way. When I was a little kid, I had a certain aversion to this whole Christ thing, to be honest with you. I grew up in Catholic schools, and sometimes we had a very rigid, perspective of what it would look like. It was only much later when I began to read for myself about this incredible spirit that has come to be with us and show us a different way of thinking that I was able to free myself from these preconceived notions that I have held until then. An example of that is this idea that I think we oftentimes find in mainstream Christianity, that Christ has suffered and died for our sins, and that there's pain and suffering, and that the image that we oftentimes remember and recall of Christ is of a Christ suffering, bloody, nailed at a cross. And I think it would be no exaggeration. I think you would agree here with me that perhaps that is the main image that Western society still holds of the Christ today. We still see a suffering and hurtful Christ bleeding in, what was in one of the most horrid torture methods of the time, right? Crucifixion. And I think that after I have studied his message, I take a very different approach of what his legacy really is. I am not sure that his legacy is one of pain and suffering. I am convinced that his legacy, his spiritual legacy, is one of renewal and rebirth and understanding a different perspective altogether when it comes to ourselves as immortal spirits. And the reason I say that is because I know of no other figure in our recorded history that has resurrected of his own volition. That is to say, that brought himself back to life. And I think that's a key message, because it is one of the most powerful instances that we have of the indication that we are more than our physical bodies. I think that the message that Christ has substantially come to teach us is that even when we perish from our physical selves, when our body, that which we're looking at right now, is no more, we, who we are, truly are, will not cease to be. And that, my friends, it's not perhaps a surprise for those of us who are here on this call today, who are watching this, because I think that we know of our interactions with Spirit. Many of us have felt it, have heard them, have seen them. But I think what's also very important for us within the spiritualist realm is to consider the deep implications of that living and of that knowledge that we now have. Because if we truly are immortal spirits, the question that sometimes we forget to ask ourselves is, are we living this life in accordance with that belief? Because sometimes we forget that we are spirits. We forget. We forget that we are immortal beings who are not made first in flesh and then of spirit. That the other way around is actually truth, that we are first made as spirits and that we temporarily inhabit this apparel of flesh so that we can learn some lessons that are important for our long-term spiritual development. So we are truly blessed, friends, to have the opportunity to know that the contact with the spiritual world, it's not something magical and supernatural that has been portrayed very erroneously in many different videos, movies, and so forth. We know that it's a day-to-day natural occurrence that has been happening since the eons of time. We know this. So the question becomes, what do we do with the knowledge that we have? Because this knowledge has the power to fundamentally transform our lives. If we recall our older brother, Jesus, who came to be with us for a short minute of time, as if to bring life and light back to a world that was dark at the moment. His focus was not in his physical life, but in his spiritual existence. Had he truly worried about his physical life first, he perhaps would not have taken some of the actions that he did. However, because he was such an evolved spirit, one that is far beyond our current understanding and our ability to comprehend, his perspective and his motivation was always in spirit. All his actions were made and were taken to show us that we too should start thinking with our spiritual selves and not our material selves. That we should place our treasures in heaven, that is to say, in our spiritual reality. That our thinking should be not in the short term, that is to think about materialistic perspectives of our materialistic and temporary life, but in a long-term approach to the immortal being that we are, who is temporarily undergoing some learning. I'll give you an example that perhaps is totally unrelated, but that's how my brain works. You might have heard about some early experiments, well, not early, some experiments that were done in last century, so in the 1900s, I think it was 1980 or so, and here in California, at the University of California, Los Angeles, they were done with some candy. What they've done was they took some kids and they said, I'm going to put a jujube, a little fruit candy here on the table. And they told the kids, if you can go for a minute without eating that candy, we'll come back here and we'll give you 2 pieces of candy, right? And so they carried out this research, and as you can imagine, some kids were able to wait for what is no doubt a very long minute when you're sitting, by yourself in a room with a candy at the table in front of you. And others, however, they were able to hold on, and some didn't. And what's interesting about this research in general, in general as well, is that they follow these kids, for 20 years after that. And they were also able to measure that those who had shown some constraint and the ability to wait for that 1 minute tended to perform better, not only socially, but emotionally in general and so forth. So What I find fascinating about that experiment is that not that we are fated to succeed or fail because we can't wait for a minute to eat a piece of candy. That's not what I mean. What I mean is there's an important lesson, because I oftentimes ask, who am I in that example? What kind of kid am I in that example? Am I the kid that is trying to eat my bar of candy right now in this life? Or have I slowly made my way to a kid who is, spiritually speaking, is thinking a little bit more long term, that I realize that perhaps curbing some of my desires right now in the physical realm will be better for me in the long run? And that's a question that I frequently ask myself. And I think that this year is a great year for us to ask those questions of ourselves as well. Now that we are sort of forced into a spiritual timeout of sorts, where we are really asked to physical distance from others so that we can take care of ourselves and take care of others, there is time for reflection. There is time for pondering about our true selves, our meaning, our purpose in this life, and what is it that the new year can bring us. I think this is really a key moment of our current incarnation, to think about what is it that we want the world to be like in the future. What kind of light are we going to bring into this world? Much the same way we have been celebrating the waning of darkness since pagan times. There is a new light that must come into this world now. As a matter of fact, I would argue that a lot of wisdom tells us that light has already been with us in this world since the birth of Christ, because that ushered in a new way of thinking that we have not fully unpacked just yet. So I think the invitation of the moment is for us to look at our world anew with new eyes, to look at the Christ with new eyes, not as that historical figure or that perhaps a religious figure that has been kidnapped by dogmatic thinking that no longer holds true. That's not what the Christ is at all, at least not for me. He is a highly evolved spirit that has come to be with us, to show us that we will overcome even our physical death, and we will continue to be who we are. And that's a fascinating perspective, because once you let that take hold in your heart, I think the fear that we see widespread right now in the world dies down a little bit. I mean, friends, we all know here in this call, we had an opportunity to talk to spirit. We know that spirit lives on after the physical body. So why are we so fearful of death? Now, I always jokingly say this, but I mean it. I'm not afraid of death. I am afraid of dying. That's different, right? How I will come to pass worries me. Will I be in pain? Will it be difficult? Will it be long? I worry about these things. But I am convinced that I have had so many experiences that show to me unequivocally that life goes on, that I no longer worry about not being or ceasing to exist. That's one thing that I take away from spiritualism in general, and from the lessons of the Christ as well. Now, the second thing I think is even more beautiful and brings solace and hope to my heart. If I will not cease to be, you will not cease to be. Our friendships, our family ties will never cease to be. That is perhaps the biggest gift that we can ever have received. To know that those who we truly love will never stop being. And that we will never stop being. Imagine this for a second, friends. Everyone that you care about will continue to love you, whether they are here in the physical plane or if they are in the spiritual realm. Isn't that amazing? What a wonderful implication this new knowledge and this new practice that we have been given can elicit in our hearts. And there is even more when I think about this. I might have told you this, but my heart fills with joy when I also think about all the other people that I have met in previous lives that I do not momentarily recall, because they continue to love me. So there is indeed an army of love directed to each one of us at any given point in our existence that we are unaware. And that brings me hope. And that brings me solace, brings me joy even. And when I remember that there is a greater power, a greater force watching over all of us, I understand that the challenges of this moment and this time are temporary. Much like the night of the winter solstice that is coming to an end, these difficult times that we live in are also going to come to an end. Are they going to come to an end on January 1st of 2021? No. But they may in our lifetimes. We might be seeing the dawn of a new era in which we begin to shift our perspective, in not small part during to this pandemic, where we stop to think selfishly of ourselves like kids who are just eating the candy bar right now because we think that there's nothing else after this, to people who come together and help each other in difficult moments because we know that we are going to survive this, and we know that it's important for me to be my brother keeper, and that you have your role in being your sister's keeper, that we take care of each other in a kind and considered way, that we no longer focus our actions just in that which satisfies me right now, but what is best for me in the long term. And what is best for me in the long term is that you are also okay, because we have a relationship with each other, whether we are in this physical plane or in the other one. And that's a fascinating perspective that I think is still a very hard one, because we have such a misconception about what the spiritual world is at large in our society. We're so afraid of death. We're so afraid of talking about spirit that for most of us out there in the world, thank God this has been changing, spirit is a scary thing, where it is quite the opposite. Why is it that as a society, we don't talk about the one thing that we are certain will happen to us more often? Why is it that our schools and our educational system, our families shy away from talking about the fact that at one point in time, as Shakespeare has aptly described, we will shed this mortal coil? And that all the world's a stage in which we are merely players, that some have their entries and exits at different times. So it's a fascinating thing for us to be sitting at the precipice of new times, at the moment of shift in which our planet will necessarily have to make a leap forward into a new era, the era of the Spirit. What a blessing it is for us when we think with spiritual eyes to be living in these moments where we get to chip in, to give our spiritual offer of selves, of ways, of sorts, in making this new world. Friends, it's some of us will not be surprised to remember that before we came into this existence, we planned it with our spiritual mentors and guides, and that we actually asked to be born here and now to face these challenges because we knew we could overcome them. So I'm going to stop babbling here because, you know me, I could go on forever. But my point here is, in this time of Christmas, whether you are wearing an ugly sweater or antlers, whether you are at home with your family or away from them, whether you are worried about your physical well-being or you think you have cleared that challenge, we're all in this together. This is a period for reflection about the gifts of the Spirit, the gifts that we have received and continue to receive every single day through prayer, through perception, through mediumship, where we are reminded of the love of God for us that constantly gives us reasons to be hopeful, that constantly gives us new knowledge that we can study on our own to understand the world around us, to give us the opportunity to transform our perspective, to no longer read the world just with our physical eyes, but think about the world and the universe with our spiritual eyes. Because when we think of ourselves and others as spiritual beings, then our conduct, our behavior, our attitudes start to shift as well. And that's what it takes to make the world a better place. It would not be gifts, physical gifts. It would not be more wealth. It would not be anything material. It will be our collective desire to change things from what they are to what they can be, to usher in more light, not only into our lives, but those around us as well, to burn bright the figurative eulog of love and light in a way that we have not done before. Change requires sacrifice. Change is hard, but the reward of change is infinite possibilities ahead of us. So in this point in time, we're all being asked to make sacrifices, to change the way we've done things before, so that we can all be happier in the future. And what a wonderful thing that us here in this call have been exposed, and I presume, I'm making an assumption here, have accepted that the interchange with the spiritual world is a reality. Have you stopped to consider how much solace that has brought to your heart? Have you stopped to consider how perhaps you would have been way more rattled by the affairs of the world if you did not believe in spirit? We are truly blessed. Even in the middle of chaos, there is order and there's love. And this part again of the year, where our spiritual friends tell us that the Christ is also closer to our spiritual atmosphere when he comes to be with us and remind us that our future is to be Christ-like, is to think with a cosmic mind, to realize our inner possibilities, to fully and irrevocably assume and take on our spiritual nature. The future looks bright, my friends. There will be times of darkness ahead. There will be times of hesitation and pain, but we will overcome much the same way he came to show us that he overcame life 2,000 years ago. He came back to show us that life goes on. Now we know it. We see it. We too come back many times as we need to. And here we are, speaking from different parts of the globe, together in ways that perhaps we would never have done before this pandemic. Look at the gift that the pandemic has already given us, to be able to connect. And what a gift it is to have the pandemic happen in these days and age when we have technology that allows us to be closer. So let's refuse to be socially distant. Let's be physically distant. Let's maintain our social ties. Let's maintain our connections and realize that we all brothers and sisters in spirit. No matter where we live, no matter the color of our skin, no matter our creed, no matter our gender, no matter our sexual orientation, we are all children of God, trailing the same road on the way to a promised Damascus, something bigger, something better. And so I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I'm excited to celebrate this new mindset that is coming to our planet. And I am honored to be able to do that walk with you and have your support and know that you are there. Even if we're separating by 6,000, 7,000 miles, I don't know how many miles, and at least 8 hours in the time zone, I feel closer to you. And I am thankful that you have opened your house today, have opened your church to be here. And I think that is a sign of things to come. I think that Christmas will be reinvented. I think that a new era is coming where spirit will manifest even more often and more powerfully as we give it space in our hearts. And the call for the moment is there space in our hearts for hope and a renewed Christ in our lives? Is there space in our hearts for a new way of being and doing that will require us to leave behind our old selves? so that we may become an even more beautiful creation of God. So thank you for having me. I will shut up now, and I look forward to hearing your reactions and chatting with you guys.
That was great. I'm so glad I'm on a wire, because I was going to run around cheering and clapping. That was absolutely brilliant, Dan. That was, do you know what? I'm not blowing smoke anywhere. That was probably one of the best presents I'm going to get this year. That was an awesome talk. Thank you.
You're so kind, Laurie. But truth is, we're all getting a big present. We're all getting a chance to be closer to Spirit and reimagine who we want to be.
Yeah.
So I think what we'd like to do then is slightly different from the format we have done before. We'd like to bring a lot of interaction from people that's watching us. So we want loads of questions popping up here on Facebook and loads of interaction, so that we're going to make this format slightly different and a lot more interaction with you guys.
Indeed, and I think everybody should shout out where they're from, because I'm seeing some wonderful places coming up here. So get typing. We want to know where you're from, where you're sat now, where you're listening to us from. Dan, you said so many things, but the reference to the Christ figure and the association with pain. Do you know what? That is so true. And it's something you don't actually sort of like consciously recognize. But you say the figure of Christ, and everybody has got that same image in their mind. And it's not a helpful thing, is it? It really isn't. No. It starts off on that negative energy.
No, it isn't. And I ask myself sometimes, Laurie, if that is like a legacy or like a inheritance that we have even of ourselves, of having lived many lives before with that image in our brains, because I think that image is counter to anything that we hear about the teachings of the Christ, yet we hold that in our minds. And it's almost an apology, right? I've heard so many people say, oh, I'm here in this life to suffer. I'm like, not me, right? I am here to learn. There will be pain along the way. I understand that, because there is consequences to my actions, and sometimes I make poor choices, right? But we are here to grow. Like, didn't he say that we are going to be Christ-like too? Didn't he say, like, all these things that I do, you too will be able to do? Right? So he's not saying you're here to suffer. He's saying you're here to learn and grow, right? So why is it that we hold on to that pain and suffering? It's hard. I mean, and it's really hard. And here's a beautiful symbolic thing that I think fascinating too. And I will shut up, I promise, because I get excited about this. I feel the great energy. You know, we carry around as Christians, you know, we carry on, you know, with crosses on our necks, right? That's not different than literally, if you think about the historical context of things, of walking around with a little guillotine around our necks, right? Because the cross was an instrument of torture. It was meant to be the most gruesome death that you could possibly have. It was not only a, let's kill you now, it's like, let's kill you, let's make you a spectacle. So everybody knows that you have done something that we don't want you to do, right? And yet, this figure has had the ability to transform our understanding of the cross. Not as an instrument of torture, but as a symbol of life beyond. Isn't that incredible? And I think that is, symbolically speaking, also an invitation for us to transform our idea of suffering into one of sublimation, right? Not that we should focus on suffering, but that we should understand that there might be pain on the way, but through our actions, we are going to be able to transform even our harshest moments into something beautiful, something that we are going to learn from. And that's all it takes, is a mindset shift, right? Does that make sense? Did I get super excited here?
No, made perfect
sense. Sometimes I get carried away, people, sorry. And sometimes I think I'm making sense, and my wife often reminds me, you're making no sense at all. I'm like, oh, all right, I got to back up.
No, you made perfect sense. There were so many salient points in there. Sadly, the experiment with the sweets, if that's any indication of personality, I had a disastrous run-in with a packet of chocolate chip cookies today. So yeah, I didn't make the grade.
But there's redemption. You and I, Laurie. But there is a redemption for us in the horizon. Like we can try again.
Yeah.
Christmas is also not a good time for us to do that experiment, by the way. So many deliciousness.
So Dan, there is a comment from Bob. I'm gonna bring this up. It's quite interesting. He does say an empty cross can be a potent symbol of life after death.
It is, right, Bob? I think you were right, and I think it's fascinating for me when I try to put my sociological eyes to work. Not that I have them, but when I try to think differently and try to understand the context. If you did that 2,000 years ago, you'll be called nuts. Because that is clearly an instrument of torture. And yet today, it has come to mean a symbol of hope. And for me, life after life, right? Isn't that incredible how we can change our perspective given a couple of years in our mindset? That by shifting the way we think about things, our world changes. The world remains the same. But how we see the world and how we interact with the world completely changes based on our mental posture towards it. I mean, we talk to spirits, right? There are a lot of people out there who think that we are crazy because we listen to spirit. And yet for us, it's perhaps one of the most beautiful moments in our lives when we have the certainty that life goes on. And yet we live in the same world. Right? So mindset is a differentiator for us. We are the ones who are standing in our own way of evolution and development. We need to change the way we think about things. And that's really hard because it means we need to kind of reevaluate what we're thinking. We got to ask ourselves, how did I learn that? And why did I learn it? Do I still think the same way? Right? And I've been reflecting quite a bit about this. I think that change comes about. I think we make choices for one or two reasons. And I write about this. It's either comfort or conviction, right? We either do something because we think that we ought to do it, but most of the time, I ask myself if we're not making choices because it's the easy and comfortable thing ahead of us. I'm going to do this or this. Which one is easiest? Oh, this one's more comfortable, right? And I think a lot of harm that we bring into ourselves is because we choose the comfortable way because it's just easier. So I think the moment is asking us not to go back into the comfort of our previous lives, right? If we have this pandemic and we solve it, because we will solve it, right? Vaccines are upon us, right? It's going to get better. The question is, what do we do after this? Do we go back to the way we were before? I don't know that that's really what we ought to do, because I think the world before the pandemic wasn't a great world either, in the sense of it was not working for everybody. So I think that this moment is bringing us closer to empathy and to understand that if we can come together to solve such a big problem like this one and do incredible things like coming up with a vaccine in 1 year that generally takes like 10 years to develop a vaccine of that magnitude, what other things can we come together on to tackle? Can we tackle homelessness? Can we tackle social injustice? Can we tackle discrimination? There's a lot of hope in the horizon, I think, if we're willing to make choices out of conviction, not to go back to comfort, what it was before.
Yes, I agree so wholeheartedly there. I think leading up to this century, humanity's always had frontiers. Each stage of evolution, we've had frontiers of mixing races, crossing countries, travel, crossing oceans, and it's always been frontiers, and that's the energy which we really thrive in, because it's something new, something we can create and build, because we do have that creative energy. And we got, in my opinion, shoot me down anybody if you don't agree, I don't mind, we got stagnant. We'd run out of frontiers. We'd run out of it. It just became a drudge. It just became a churning and no achievement possible. But now we've got a new frontier. We can rewrite this world. And how awesome is that as a premise? And what a frontier. Sorry, soapbox.
No, right. I think this is the beauty of the moment. Like, we're collectively coming together to talk about this. That is amazing. I am wholeheartedly on that bandwagon.
So another question that comes from Denise to say, how will our loved ones in the spiritual world be adjusting to this new era?
I think that they have a leg on us, right? Because what we do know from our spiritual friends is that when we leave our physical bodies, our awareness grows, right? Our spirit, the light of our spirit is no longer as limited by the flesh, right? So we feel things more intensely. We think more intensely about things, but we are told that we do not attain immediate enlightenment. Right? It's not we pass over and all of a sudden we're enlightened. That's not. We continue to be who we are, just in a more intense way. Now, the beautiful piece about our loved ones who have already passed and gone before us is that they have a higher vantage point if they so choose, right? Where they can already focus on things. And obviously, they are constantly reminded that they are spiritual beings. We ourselves, however, are lagging behind because we forget. We don't think of ourselves as spiritual beings that often, right? I've been saying this recently. I think that many of us, and this is no criticism, many of us spend more time brushing our teeth or taking showers in our lives than thinking of ourselves as spiritual beings. Mind you, I'm not saying don't shower, don't brush your teeth. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, I know it is winter, but and the French did invent perfume for that matter, but think about this, like the time that we devote to our daily existence, if you parse it out, it is possible, this is no criticism, this is just an analysis of my own life, that we don't spend a lot of time thinking of ourselves as spiritual beings. I'm not saying that we should only think of ourselves as spiritual beings. I'm saying there could be more space in our days and in our lives for reflection of how we live our lives. Right? So I think there are spiritual friends who are already on the other side. They have that time. So they are more okay with what's going on. They should be if they are balanced, because we also know that sometimes not all spiritual friends are fully balanced, right? They're also worried with our stuff. But if they are understanding this, and no doubt they are cheering us on. No doubt they are supporting us from over there. But they also recognize that we need to go through our own challenges. We must climb our own walls. And that's perhaps one of the biggest challenges, I think, that we have, is to understand that we cannot live other people's lives for them. We can be there for them, but ultimately, Fabricio's life is Fabricio's life. Larry's life is his life. Dan's life is like, you cannot make me do what I don't want to do. And that's the learning. We've got to do it on our own. Otherwise, where is the merit in things? Right? If God could have created us perfect from the beginning, but what would be the learning in that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got to do and we got to learn things. And when we learn, we grow. And I think it's really hard when we want to move other people along. But I'm also very grateful that we have so much help from the spiritual world that we are sometimes unaware of. And I know that our loved ones and our friends are cheering us on there, but they're also holding back from interfering in our lives when they're wise, because they know that we are the ones who need to make those decisions. They can be our cheerleaders. They can be the captains of our cheer squad. They're like over there, yay, go, you can do this, right? They're sending us message. They're sending us love. Sometimes they come talk to us. Sometimes we visit with them when we are asleep, right? During sleep, we know that we can detach from our bodies, and while our physical bodies need rest, the spirit does not. And we go and we connect with that which we want to connect with. And some of us go to classes, some of us, meet with others, plan different life events, and we have a chance to be with them. So we're never far away from those we truly love. My God, what a blessing it is to know the things that we know now through spirit.
Yeah, so true. Dan, tell me, you've just released your book, have you not, sir?
I have. Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me the space to chat a little about it. I will tell you that in the past year, actually, funny enough, I started writing this book while I was out there in London last year. I've been thinking a little bit about how oftentimes we were talking about the Christ and the image that we have of Christ. And I think that in my mind, a lot of Christianity has been very dogmatic in my head for, through upbringing. And I've been trying to revisit some old stories and think about them, not from a dogmatic perspective, but a symbolic and spiritual perspective. And so I just launched this book a couple of weeks ago on the 12th called Our Road to Damascus. And in it, I have a chance to revisit that beautiful passage in which some of you might be familiar, where Saul of Tarsus, as he's going from Jerusalem to Damascus, has this important moment where he meets the Christ. And traditional Christianity tells you it's a moment of conversion, and sure, that could be it. But for me, it's a moment of personal transformation. And so I take a step back in this book, and I look at 7 different lessons that I take from his journey that are symbolic to us today, right? Because when we look back at the recorded history, I find it hard for us to locate or to find another person who underwent such a profound transformation as he did, Paul the Apostle, right? When he went for the person who was perhaps the greater persecutor of the Christ message to one of its most important supporters. So, for instance, while he's on the road to Damascus, we are told in Acts, he has this calling and he falls off like his horse, basically, right? And has this encounter. And I think about it and I say, you know what? A lot of our spiritual experiences are not necessarily like angels playing an orchestra. Really is through pain and suffering, right? We have our proverbial falling off our horse too in life. Sometimes the most difficult lessons that we learn are those that come through destabilizing moments, for challenging moments, such as this one that we live in. It's a pandemic, right? At the same time, there are others, like for instance, in his transition from Saul to Paul, he also becomes blind during a period of time, right? And I wonder if we ourselves don't oftentimes feel blind and confused in the world as well when we begin to accept spirituality in our hearts. When we begin to think with our spiritual eyes, this world in front of us becomes really confusing because we are learning to see things with a different perspective. Right? Another lesson, for instance, I share is I look at different things. I say he was on the road with other people, but he was the only one that saw and heard the Christ at that time. And I think it's a powerful lesson for us that this invitation for enlightenment comes to all of us. Right? We may even experience that invitation with other people in our lives, but it all happens at different times for each one of us. It might be that you are called to enlighten yourself at one particular part of your life, and it might be troublesome for you that you want the people that you love who are next to you to go and join you in that journey. But each one of us has their own journey. Right? So there are different lessons that we unpack in our road to Damascus. I could talk to you for a while, but I don't want to, take more of your airtime here. There's 7 of them, and one of them is exactly sort of what we're talking about, which is making a decision. There's a moment that we need to make a decision. Do we go back to our old ways, which I call Jerusalem, right? Do we, in the middle of the road, when we find ourselves confused and hurting and uncertain, we have a choice. Do we go back to Jerusalem? Do we go back to the ways that were before because that's comfortable? Or do we decide to go ahead to Damascus, even if we don't know exactly what it looks like? Even if we don't know how we get there? It is an important decision point in our lives when we say, I will no longer be that which I was before. I will transform into something greater. So I try to make it very palatable and it's not a religion-y book. It's really more of a book focused on personal transformation and some of these 7 lessons that we're facing. I am happy to tell you that you can easily grab a copy out there in the UK if you want to. It is available at Amazon, and I'll stop my pitch. Amazon in the UK. You can also find it at Book Depository for those of you who are familiar with the website. Blackwell's website also sells it. Waterstone's website also has it. So different places. And of course, you can always visit danassisi.com and find links there. So that was my pitch, right? For a year of change, a book about change. How about that? How's my marketing skills? Is it working? By Larry's face, I think I need to take some marketing classes.
Well, I think it's working. People say it's going to be their New Year's gift. So people.
Yay! Thank you, June. That is so kind of you to say. I'm seeing the comments here now.
So it feels like then perhaps in the new year we could arrange another time where we could explore a little bit more about your book, because it'll be great to hear it from the author.
You are very kind. Thank you. Of course, I'll be glad to talk about it. I feel a little awkward promoting my own book. That's a weird thing. I need to get better at that.
So, well, you're not promoting. We are promoting on your behalf. So if anyone is interested in Dan's book, the link has been shared on the chat there on Facebook. So the link for the Amazon, our road to Damascus.
Yeah, and you can always visit danassisi.com and find all those links if you want to find them. I know that some of our friends here in the US are really trying to support local, we call them indie, right? Bookstores. They are individually owned. So you can find them through IndieBound and all these other websites. So thank you for letting me talk about the book. I do hope that if you decide to pick it up, also available in ebook and hardcover and paperback, that you enjoy it. That's my greatest desire. I walked with Paul for a year thinking about this, and I hope that it brings you joy.
Lawrence, are you on mute? I can hear you.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was an absolutely wonderful night. Thoroughly enjoyable, sir. You really pulled it out of the hat tonight, and we can't thank you enough.
Thank you for making a space and making yourself available to chat. I always have tons of fun connecting with you and Fabrizio. Okay, maybe more with you, Larry. Maybe not so much with Fabrizio.
Yeah. I have to tell my friends here on Facebook, this too has been picked on me all evening. And I think they did not like my jumper Christmas. I don't know if you guys can see it.
There you go. We're jealous. We're jealous, to be honest.
They are just jealous of my jumper.
and now you've told your friends on Facebook. I hope both of them were listening. So
no, but seriously, thank you. It's these moments that we have together. I think it's the very message. Like, we have fun. We have joy, and we talk about important things. So thank you for making the space, and thank you for inviting me. It's really great to have brothers from another mothers in different places of this globe of ours.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think, gentlemen, it is time. Both of you have an absolutely awesome Christmas. Yeah. Very much of the vein. It's not what's under the tree. It's not what's on the table. It's those around it and those around us as well. That's really, really, really what counts. So I wish you all the best for Christmas and new adventures, new life, new adventures, new year.
Well said. Merry Christmas, everyone.
And just for your information to the two of you, all my friends on Facebook say, I'm loving your jumper, Fab. Don't listen to them. So I got them on my side. Yay!
So next year, I propose that next year we do this again, but we all have the same jumper.
Ooh. Oh, a Christmas tradition being born. Ooh, exciting.
Right. Definitely. Okay. So for me, I would like to say Merry Christmas to you all. Thanks, Dan, for being with us. Lawrence, thanks very much for being with us here too. And this work that we've been doing for 9 months now is being...
God, it's like a pregnancy.
Since lockdown, right?
Can I go in labour and get rid of all this now?
No, it's been great. And before we actually go to Lawrence for the closing prayer, is there any one of you want to do as a close remarks?
I feel like I talked a lot already, so I think I'm going to exercise my my learning and listen.
Absolutely. Again, this is one of those seminal talks that we can go back to again. Don't forget, everybody, these are all available on our YouTube channel. Search channel PCSC. So type in PCSC, refine the search by the channel, and all the Spiritist nights, this one included, will be on the playlist there. Because there was so much in Dan's talk that we can go back to and just take the little segments out as and when we need them. Brilliant. Thank you, sir.
So over to you, Lawrence, for our closing prayer.
Okay. Friends, once more, just join in that inner peace, that inner sanctuary, that inner silence, and give thanks. Give your heartfelt thanks for being able to be here this time, this night, this moment. Hands across the world, united, together, but each with our own song to sing, each with our own story to tell and to continue writing, but knowing that we all come from the same source. We are all linked and we are all united. So let us tear down these walls, these tags, these names, these words, these sentiments that keep us divided, and help us to unite and to bring together that flame of love and truth and light. Amen.
Amen. So, Facebook friends, I'd like to say a goodbye. I see you all in the new year with some more talks. Thanks for being with us. Have a good Christmas and a happy New Year. And I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye from me.
Good night from me.
Good night.
Good night, Dan.